Yo, welcome back to another video, guys. My name is David, if you don't know who I am. And specifically today, I will be showing you guys the exact script that I use to help me book on 3 to 5 appointments every single day. Now, a lot of you may have the wrong way of going about things in terms of, how do I book this guy person, or how do I book these people in? You want to make sure that you have clarity before you ever you book someone in. You want to make sure that you're optimizing your time efficiently as well. As much as important as their time is, your time is as valuable as well, right? Because you don't want unqualified leads who can't pay you. You don't want unqualified leads who don't need the systems that you're offering to be wasting 30 to 1 hour to 45 minutes of your day, right? So this is the exact script that I use to make sure that I book on appointments, I pre-qualify them before they jump on a closing call with me. So without further ado, let's get straight into it. From here, we're gonna start off on script start, right? So this is essentially for outbound. So a lot of you guys might be thinking like, what is outbound? Well, there's two specific parts. So there's inbound and outbound, right? So inbound is more so of like actual marketing agencies and agencies that are bringing in leads from paid advertisements and forms and funnels. Don't worry about that. This is cold calling. So you're specifically going to do outbound reaching, so outreaching to these clients, right? If you're watching this video. So first, what you want to say is essentially, hey, have a start off and have an actionable, frame, right? So what you could say is like, hey, James. And the reason why you say, hey, James, is you want to make sure that you insert the authority, and you're essentially letting them know like, oh, I already know this person. If you say, oh, this is just David calling here, or hey, is this James? You're essentially letting them know that, oh, like this is a cold call. This is definitely a cold call. If you say just, they know it's a cold call. So you can say, hey, James, pause, let them say, yeah, who is this? Yeah, this is David calling here. Like, I had a few minutes to reach out. We've been working with a few XYZ industry, whatever it is that you're working with, to help them optimize their own systems, blah, blah, 10 more clients, whatever it is that you're doing, right? And then you want to make sure that you end it off with, so I'm curious to ask if you guys are currently optimizing any systems. Now, the reason why I have it like this is because you're at first letting them know that you know them, James. Then you're saying, this is David calling here. So you're letting them know who you are. And you say, I had a few minutes to reach out. So now you're inserting authority, because now you're letting them know, this is psychology. You're essentially letting them know like, oh shoot, this guy probably was busy and he actually had a few minutes to reach out to me. I should listen to what he says. And say, we've been working with XYZ. So now you're telling them, what do you guys do? Then you're ending it off in a term of like a question, right? So you're ending it off open-ended. You want to make sure that every single time you have something to say, you leave it off open-ended a majority of the time, right? Whether that's like, does that sound fair enough, or does that make sense? Does that give you clarity? Like, those are open-ended questions. If you say like, yeah, we do this and then do that, that's closed-ended. They don't really have anything to say back to you. So you want to make sure that you always leave it open-ended. So obviously once you do that, and then they say like, hey, yeah, what exactly do you guys do? You can just give them a short level overview, right? So for example, we help you like optimize to buy back more of your time, blah, 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 XYZ, right? But if they don't ask you that and they just say like, oh, okay, that sounds pretty interesting. Yeah, I am interested. Or if they ask like, yeah, we are currently optimizing these systems, then you can go into discovery and context, which is more like, okay, so who usually handles all the admin work? Is it you, or do you have an admin team in place, right? And you don't have to say specifically this, you don't have to say like, is it you, or do you have an admin team? A majority of the time you can say it, but you want to make sure that they tell you the answer. So you can just leave it off as, who usually handles all the admin work? And they'd be like, oh yeah, it could be me. I have a team that does that. So you want to make sure that you leave questions that they can actually think and then actually give you good clarity on, right? Because the majority of the time, if you just say like, hey, is it you that you do the admin, or is it, do you have someone else that does it in place? A majority of the time, most of the time actually, they are going to essentially answer the easiest question or the first question that you ask, right? Then you can go on to, keep on going through your frame, your script, saying like, are you typically doing this when starting off the day, blah, blah, blah. Is it throughout the day? If I asked you how many hours you're putting into a week's time, would you know the number? And you're essentially going through the questions, right? You guys can copy the questions, doesn't really matter, but you guys can always optimize and match it to your own style, right? So what you can also say is like, okay, so what do you feel like is one of the biggest constraints you want to upgrade right now? So now you're essentially implementing pain. Or the thing that they are struggling with in terms of cold call. So you want to make sure that you extract the pain. When you want to extract their thing that they need to improvise, right? Because that's a cold call. You don't know what they're not, you don't know what they're dealing with. So you want to make sure that you extract that pain. Then from there, you can say like, what's your main goal here? Are you looking to eventually scale, grow it enough? Now this is where you're essentially getting the information that you need in terms of like, is this a actual client that we can work with? Do they have the motivation? Do they have that drive to keep on running the business? Or is this just something that they want to do and not really scale, and they're comfortable on where they're at? If they're comfortable on where they're at, they're not really going to be a client, and most of the time they're not going to sign. So you want to make sure that you ask this question to get clarity on that, right? So after that, you can say like, okay, well, what happens when things get busy or when no one's able to get to the phones or anything like that? So these are just extra questions that you can answer. And then after that, you can essentially go into the transition phase, right? So you can say like, okay, and do you feel like that's helping you scale, blah, blah, you know, and stuff like that. So if they ask you like what we do, you can say what we do. You could give them a high level overview, and you can also give them a what we don't do. So they know exactly what we don't do here, right? And typically when you do transition, most of the time you want to make sure that you financially qualify them. So like, okay, so this investment is XYZ amount of investment, but this is a cold call. You want to make sure that you get to know that they are qualified, right? And then you just want to have as much booked appointments on your schedule to the point where, you know, if you put in as much volume, you're going to get chances of people closing, right? So I would leave the financially qualifying part out. If you guys want to get a little bit more clarity on that, then feel free to let me know. I'll put it in the comment section, and or feel free to put it in the comment section, and I can just remake this video with the financial qualification on top. But this is where you want to essentially tie down. That way you minimize the chance of them not showing, right? So what you can do here is you can say like, okay, well, listen, based on everything on this call, what we can do here is set up a Zoom where I'd be happy to give you a more in-depth overview of the diagnostic that I created for you on top of what exactly is that we do, right? So it looks like I do. And after you say that, you want to go straight into your calendar. You don't want to be like, does that make sense? You don't want to say that, because now you're gonna be like, oh, you know, they're going to be thinking about it. So you just go straight into the calendar. Be like, okay, so like what we can do here is set up a Zoom, XYZ, blah, blah. And it looks like I do have a date and a time available here tomorrow at 4 p.m. Does that work for you? So now you're essentially leaving that as an open-ended question, like I mentioned earlier in this video, right? You leave it at that. After that, you just want to make sure that you double tie down, making sure and you confirm that they're going to be in a quiet environment, saying, okay, so just to make sure that, you know, 4 p.m. tomorrow is a good time where you're able to sit 30 minutes or 45 minutes or an hour at your desk and, you know, access to a computer in a quiet environment, ready to have a pen and paper to take down notes. They're going to say, yeah. Or most of the time they're like, oh, I might be driving. So you want to make sure that they're in a quiet environment, because most of the time if people are in a quiet environment, access to a laptop, face cam, you know, essentially looking at a camera on your computer, they have a more high intent to buy. So once they do that, confirm that they'll be in a quiet environment. And after that is done, you essentially just go through the invitation, and you want to make sure that you send them an invitation, whether if that's Calendly, Go High Level, or, you know, HubSpot, not HubSpot. Just any calendar platform that you're using, right? OneSub, which I meant to say. If you guys are using that, make sure to just do that. Send them an invitation. Make sure that they confirm on the call with you to make sure that they ingrain that they have a meeting coming up. And after that is done, that is pretty much the whole script. Shouldn't be taking more than, honestly, 8 minutes. Obviously, there shouldn't be a specific time that you should end the call or book the call in, but you know, it shouldn't be, honestly, more than 10 minutes if you do it right. So without further ado, that is going to be the end of the video. Very quick, short video for you guys to give you some clarity on how to actually book on 3, 4, 5 appointments every single day. But that is essentially the video. If you guys have any questions, and like I mentioned, if you guys want to get more clarity on how to actually financially qualify your prospects before booking on the meeting, feel free to leave it down in the comments below. And without further ado, I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.